Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative Party believes that they are better at investigations in dealing with the bringing forward of criminal charges than our judicial system, and specifically our RCMP. The RCMP have expressed extreme discomfort with what it is that the Conservatives are doing. The member's upset because I repeat it. Well, if it's the truth and it's being repeated, one would think it would eventually sink in. To use the Conservative term, what is the Conservative Party doing to the RCMP thoughts? They are flipping them the bird, using her words, Mr. Speaker. Well, quite frankly, where was the Conservative attitudes of violating the potential charter rights of individuals when it came to the many scandals that they had, whether it was the anti-terrorism scandal, the Phoenix scandal, the G8 spending scandal, the ETS scandal, the F-35 scandal, the Senate scandal, and the election scandals? The Conservative Party has a pretty shady record. Never did they go around saying, we're going to go and collect information, even if it violates the charter, in order to give assistance to the RCMP. Why this change in attitude and disregard for the RCMP?
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, let me do something I don't do on a regular basis. Quote the leader of the Green Party, who said the same thing that many of other people have said in the House of Commons today, which is she did not find any intellectual basis in the constitutional argument. And that's because there is none. And I mean, come on, Mr. Speaker, to argue that it's truth because the government who's trying to hide the documents says it's truth, it's such a stretch. It's like, it's such a stretch, right? I mean, you know, I know that the member opposite, he's served for a long time in my home province of Manitoba's legislature. He has I believe, a daughter who's served for a long time as well, too, in the legislature. At some point, I hope he looks inside and goes, I cannot support the PMO and the party leader. I can't do this. And I hope in that moment that instead of coming in here and saying those sorts of ridiculous things, that he has some self-respect, perhaps buys himself a nice lunch instead of coming here and trying to say things and convince us of things that we know in our hearts are not true.
Question et commentaire, l'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to come back to our role as parliamentarians. Our role is to pass legislation that is useful for the people and good for them. But we've been slowed down in our role about this necessity to provide documents. Now, we can pass legislation that's good for the Canadian people, but also our role, which is to analyze situations which have the potential to be problematic in order to improve our process. What does my colleague think of this? And given the refusal of us to go forward.
Just underlined the importance of this place and the importance of respecting the rules of this place. And in that, I wholeheartedly agree. You know, her and I may vehemently disagree on approaches to public policy, but the reality is that we each have the duly elected right bestowed upon us by all of our constituents to raise our voices on the issues we may disagree with in order to come up with public policy that's in the best interest of Canadians. But we can only do that, as she said, when our privileges are respected, when we can get the documents that this place have ordered, when we can examine the government's activities and hold the government to account, and when the rules of this place are upheld. And when we have an executive government, a branch of government led by a prime minister who has frequently, abjectly, completely ignored, and yes, flipped the bird to this place, then we have a duty to end this government and move on and elect a new government that will not do all of these things that he has done that has led to the erosion of Canadian democracy over the last decade.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Nepean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I keep hearing Parliament is supreme. I agree. But in the Constitution of Canadian system of government, we have the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Each have their own powers and responsibilities. That is something many of us seems to forget. On this specific debate, Mr. Speaker, RCMP has written to Law Clerk of the House of Commons in July that any records they obtain through this process cannot be used in their investigative work. So why is that we are still insisting that, and there's nothing that prevents, or the member can explain to me if there's anything that prevents RCMP from getting whatever the records, whatever the documents that it needs, if and when there's an investigation.
The honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
There absolutely is one thing. There's absolutely something that prevents the RCMP from getting those documents. It's the Liberal Party of Canada. Right. And it's why we passed this motion in this place to compel those documents, because the member's party has completely blocked justice in this sense. And that's why we're doing this today. So, it was actually the member opposite who just raised the question that I was referring to in my earlier remarks, saying that members like him who do not hold a government position, I guess he kind of does, but he needs to look inside and say, I will not do the dirty work of this government anymore. I will not be complicit in this. And when he keeps standing up and raising talking points that just are patently false, he is not being true to himself or his constituents who brought him here to uphold the rules and respect their rights and privileges. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.